And I've invited Sara Dykman here today to talk to you, but first I want to do a quick little spiel about the Open Space Committee. If anyone from Ipswich isn't familiar with it, the Open Space program was initiated, I think, 2000, and we have a bond that we can draw against to buy open space. And we have in town some of the best monarch habitat around. And Strawberry Hill, everyone know where Strawberry Hill is, out on Jeffrey's Next Road? That's a wonderful, beautiful place, and there's a lot of milkweed there, and actually a little garden went in right by the parking lot to do more native plants. I don't know if anyone's seen that yet. We've protected, the whole program has protected 891.2 acres since its inception, which is a lot of land. Strawberry Hill's about 91 acres. Anyone been to Nichols Field? It's out Labor and Vane Road. This is 15 acres right along the river, and it has a path all the way around. To be careful of poison ivy. There's a lot of poison ivy. But I went here the other day to take a photo, and I just looked at that first milkweed plant and found a monarch egg, the very first plant I looked at. Yeah, I was like, wow. I wasn't even looking for eggs. I just like, oh, I'm here. I might as well take a peek. And sure enough, there was an egg. So this is a great little quick walk, too. That is another full of milkweed habitat. And we just purchased Pony Express. For those in Ipswich, know that was a great purchase for us, and we own about 30 acres of it are going to be soccer fields, and then Essex County Greenbelt and the state of Massachusetts own the rest, so it's protected 128 acres in total that we all can use, and we only own part of it. And currently there are no big milkweed habitats for monarchs, but I have my eye on that irrigation pond, because there's a lot of space there to put in like an unmown area and get some milkweed going. So keep in tune for that. And outside of the program, you're familiar with Sally Pond right downtown? This is a property owned by the Ipswich Museum, and it's probably one of the biggest sort of urban milkweed habitats around. I can't think of any other place right downtown where they can walk off the train and go into this meadow, and all of those broadleaf plants are milkweed. It's pretty fantastic. And I've been there the last couple days just looking around, and there's been monarchs every single time I've gone down there. We actually released one today down there, and there were 2 other wild ones flying around. And New England Biolabs actually gave them some funding to make it into more of a botanical garden. So take a walk down there, and you'll see some of these flowers that weren't here before, and DeRose Environmentals planted a lot of those plants and took out a lot of the invasives. And there are going to be some signs. I think they're going to have signs for 7 of the different native plant species. You can walk around and learn about, good plants for pollinators. I think that's it. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Sara. If you have any questions about the Open Space Committee, come talk to me. There's some brochures here on it as well. And I'm going to introduce Sara. Sara Dykman. She arrived yesterday from Maine, has cycled about 5,000 miles so far. She started in Mexico where the monarchs winter and has gone up, she'll tell you more about it, has gone up through Canada and arrived here today and is going to go all the way back to Mexico by November. I'm tired just thinking about it, 10,000 miles. Anyways, Sara.
Stop it. Well, thank you so much for coming out tonight and supporting the Monarch. Who's seen a Monarch this season? Yes, all right. Keep your eyes out. Now that we've talked about it, you will start seeing monarchs everywhere. And every time you'll see one, you'll be like, whoa, and everyone will think you're crazy, and then you'll be part of the club. So my trip is called ButterBike. And it's not because I love butter. That's what happens when I ask kindergartners why my trip is called ButterBike. No, not because I love butter. It is because I cannot fly like a butterfly. So butterflies fly, ButterBike, butterbikers, bike. This is my attempt at flying, by the way. I call that trick Superman. But I should call it trying to be a butterfly. Guys, laugh at my jokes. Thank you. You're not going to get through this presentation if you don't laugh at some really bad jokes. So, okay, I know you have it in you. Now, a little bit about me. That's me there. And I grew up in Kansas, but I went to school in California and got a degree in wildlife biology, which let me get jobs doing awesome stuff. Basically, I go out into the woods for summers, usually about a 3-month season, and just look for animals, take measurements, collect data, and get paid. And you can see in this picture there's no buildings because I'm in the middle of the woods. I don't have rent. There's nothing to buy. There's no restaurants. There's nothing. So you save all your money, and then you get to go on trips. And this will be my 5th big trip. I've canoed across the U.S. on the Missouri River. I hiked the Continental Divide Trail from Mexico to Canada. I did a bike tour to 49 states, and then I did a Latin America bike tour from Bolivia to Texas. So I've done lots and lots of biking. But I've never followed the Monarch, so this is sort of new for me, and it's exciting, and I'm learning every day. And speaking of the Monarch, there, wow, let's all just give a round of applause to that beauty. So, how many folks here know are like Monarch experts, or know a lot about Monarchs? Yeah. Okay, so I apologize if this is a little basic, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page because they're so awesome, and you can't begin to imagine how awesome they are if you don't know a little of the life history. So bear with me. This is a range map of the Monarch. So this is where you can find them, where they live. Now, who here has seen a Monarch in Massachusetts in the summertime? Yeah. Who here has seen one in the wintertime? Exactly. There are no Monarchs here in the winter because they migrate. So you can see there's 3 colors on this map. The yellow is the summer range, which is what color Massachusetts is there. And then the green and the orange are where their migratory routes, the spring and summer, or spring and fall, excuse me. And then can you find the little blue dots on the map? They're super tiny. There's 4 blue dots, and those are where they overwinter. So there are California populations that tend to do a little mini migration in California on the western side of the Rocky Mountains. There's a Florida population, and then there is the cream of the crop. This is the migration that's the most well-known. It's the most grand, if you will, and it's the one that I'm focusing on because it's kind of mind-blowing. So brace yourselves. Are you braced? Okay, good. So I went to that blue dot to start my trip, and I was like, blue, why did they choose blue? If I was making this map, I probably would have made it orange, only because that's what it looks like. So I went there, and there are these green trees covered in orange monarchs. So you can imagine all the monarchs that you see in Kansas, in Minnesota, in New York, in Massachusetts. Most of them will go to this one tiny little area in Mexico that's less than 70 miles wide. So it is a tiny, tiny spot. The concentration is crazy, and there's so many monarchs sometimes on the branches that the branches break. That's a lot of monarchs. Now, when it's cold, they're just hanging out on the trees. In fact, that's why they go to Mexico, because it's just cold enough that they can just hang out on the trees and not burn any energy, and so they can basically just save their fat reserves to last until the spring when they have to migrate again. So they're going there to find a spot where they can be as lazy as possible, but not freeze to death. But when the sun comes out, the most incredible thing in the world happens. They start to fly. Now, unfortunately, I'm not as good on the, I'm just gonna something here. Okay. Into the woods, and you'll see those tiny little dots. And those are all monarchs. We're talking lots and lots of monarchs. This is a 2-hour video, so just sit back.
What do they do? Why are they?
So, what they do every day. Let me just, has anyone been to Mexico and seen this? Oh yeah, we got a couple folks. So, they're flying around when it gets warm. Towards the end of the season, they're all descending down the mountains to find water, because they do need to drink water periodically all winter. And they'll be doing a little nectaring. And before they start to migrate for real, they'll start breeding as well. So they'll be flying around. And someone mentioned the flapping of their wings. That is my favorite part. Was that your guys' favorite part? Flapping of the wings? Okay. Well, when they start to fly around, like the rule, when you go there, you have to have a guide. There's actually about 9 sanctuaries, they call them, and 4 are open to the public. And there's lots of rules to minimize impact. And one of those rules is you can't talk. So you'll be with all these tourists just gazing up at the sky, and you'll just hear like millions of wings beating. Yeah, it's amazing, yeah. It was my favorite part, and the shadows on the ground too were really cool. So, I'm going to pick this one right here, and I'm going to put her on the map. And does anyone want to give her a name? Yeah, do you have a good name for her? Forget? No? Okay. My favorite name that I've heard from students is Miss Butters. Do you approve? Miss Butters? Okay. That's Miss Butters. And Miss Butters lives in Mexico from November to March. And in March, she starts to fly north. And as she's flying north, she's looking for a very special plant. What is that plant called? Milkweed. What? Milkweed. Yeah, milkweed. And this is a milkweed. And if you break a leaf, you get that milky latex, gluey poison. So pay attention. This is important. It is not milk. It's not milk. It looks like milk. That's why it's called milkweed, but it's not milk. It is both a glue, so it can glue shut the mouths of young caterpillars or other herbivores that are trying to eat it, and it's also a poison. Now, the caterpillars have figured out ways to deal with both of those things, and in fact, they can eat the poison, sequester it, or hold it in their bodies, and that makes them toxic. So that is why a monarch caterpillar is bright orange. They're warning predators that they taste really bad because when they were caterpillars, they ate milkweed. Now, milkweed is the only food of the monarch caterpillar. So the female's flying around looking for this beautiful plant, and then she'll lay an egg on it. Can you guys see the egg? Right there. And they usually lay one per plant. And that way when the egg hatches, the caterpillar has plenty of food. If she put all 500 on one plant, that would not be enough food. So usually she lays one. Now I chose this picture for my presentation, not because it's the most beautiful picture I've ever taken, but can you tell what's in the background there? What is it? No, that's true. So I actually haven't thought of it that way. This is a kind of, it is a for sale sign, so it could mean we're going to develop this. But this is actually just on the side of the road. So my thinking more was, there's a road right there. And this is a perfect reminder that we live with the monarchs. So there's so many species where we just need to give them a bunch of space and leave them alone. And that's the best thing we can do for them. The monarch is super cool because we can share our living spaces with them. And they don't need these vast tracts of untouched land. They really just need a roadside, right, like this one, that they can have some milkweed. So that's why one of the species has touched so many of us, is because they visit our roadsides, they visit our yards, and they visit our schools and our churches and our towns. Now, so there's our caterpillar egg, turned to caterpillar. And the first instar, like Katie was saying, looks a little different. It's not quite as beautiful. But then it eats and eats. It's an eating machine. It starts to eat more and more and more. And then we have a nice big fifth instar. Can you guys find it? Can you find both of them? Yeah, good eye, scientist. One, and then two. And I actually took this picture. I didn't move the caterpillars. I had just entered Texas. You can see I'm on my bike up there. And the best thing about biking is when you see something cool, you slam on your bike brakes, you throw your bike down, and then you go investigate. You know, in a car, you're like, woo, probably wasn't that cool. But on a bike, you stop, because you want to stop. You need a brake. So you're always looking for an excuse to stop. And so I saw these guys on this milkweed plant called antelope horn, and I slammed on my brakes, threw my bike down, and went over to investigate. And about 5 minutes later, the cops came, because someone had reported a cyclist having crashed. And I was like, no, I'm cool. Like, it's good. I'm just taking photos of caterpillars. And the cop was like, okay, I'm going to ask you again. Are you okay? So you get lots of weird looks, but there's a lot of cool things. And one of my favorite things, actually, I'll see a plot of milkweed, and I'll be looking, and I'll find all these other things. There's so much to see on just one plant. It's really exciting. Now, from a caterpillar, does it just erupt beautiful wings? No, there's one more stage. What is that stage? Chrysalis, yes. And you can see this one is getting closer to emerging. It has, or eclosing. I'm learning as I go. You can see that there's the start of the orange wings in there, and it'll get blacker and oranger, and then it will eclose. Is that right? Eclose. And then, of course, we have our beautiful monarch. Is this a male or female monarch?
Male.
How'd you know? The dots, yeah, you can see right here. It's not the best picture for it, but they have these little dots. So when you're in your garden, you can know if it's a male or female. Now, this is the kids of Miss Butters, and I'm going to put her kids on the map. Now you can see Miss Butters is gone. Those are her kids. And the reason Miss Butters is gone is because after she lays her 500 eggs, I'm sorry to say, but she dies. It's okay, because those eggs became caterpillars, and then chrysalis, and then adults, and they are what we call the first generation. And they live a lot less time than Miss Butters. They usually only live a couple weeks to a month. But during that time, they continue the migration, and we're going to do this together. As they fly, they lay eggs on what plant? Yeah. And then the adults die. It's okay, though, because their eggs become caterpillars. Very good. Let's get this energy going. We're on TV, guys. Yeah. Caterpillars to? Yeah, to? Yeah, adults. So this is our second generation. These are the grandkids of Miss Butters. And they also continue the migration. And they also lay their eggs on what type of plant? And then but their eggs become? And then chrysalis, and then adults, upside down adults. This will be the third generation, or the great-grandkids of Miss Butters. And it's sometime between the third and the fifth generation where they know that if they stayed in that summer range, that they would die. They would not survive the cold, cold winters. So instead, they fly all the way back to Mexico. That would be like me being like, by the way, if you want to survive this next winter, I need you to walk to your great-great-grandmother's house. No phone. No, you can't call her and ask. You can't look at a map. You just know to go there. And so when you see those little butterflies, how do they know that? I don't know, but it's really cool and really exciting. Now, I had a lot of different things I could do when I chose to do this bike tour. And along the way, I've gotten to see lots and lots of awesome animals, but let me just emphasize how awesome the monarch is, okay? So, I saw these guys in Texas. Can you guys tell what they are from the picture? Bats, yeah, these are Mexican freetail bats. They migrate, just like a monarch, but they don't have a multi-generational route. So, the adults would arrive in this cave in Texas in the summer, and they'd have their pups in this cave, and there'd be about 3 million at peak season, and then the adults and the new pups would fly together south for the winter. So, they're awesome, but they're not monarch awesome, right? Now there's also, I've seen lots of awesome animals that also eat milkweed. I don't know, do you see these weevils and? Okay. These ones are really awesome. I call them elephant weevils, or elephant beetles, but I looked them up. They're called the milkweed weevil, and they lay their eggs in the stem of the milkweed. And unlike the monarch, they don't migrate. So they can eat the milkweed, but they overwinter underground as adults. Now, the monarch, so not monarch awesome, right? Now, also I've seen this guy. And when I was biking down the road, I saw him, and then I was like, slam on my brakes, maybe not, and I kept moving. And I think he was trying to get over the ditch, so I biked past him, and then he was trying to find a way, and he just kind of walked up the road until we were face to face. You know, I took this picture like 5 feet away, but I was really still, and they must not be able to see very well. And he was trying to figure out what I was, and I was hoping he didn't figure it out, and then he kept going. So pretty cute. But skunks obviously defend themselves by smelling bad, and monarchs defend themselves by being poisonous. So 2 very different but very unique ways of defense. Still, monarch, pretty awesome, right? I'm going to stop using awesome here in a couple minutes. Don't worry. Now, the last one is people are like, oh, you're probably following the monarch because they're so beautiful. And I'm like, yeah. But there is one animal that's got the monarch beat. I hate to say it. I'm going to show it to you right now. And you have my permission to say, oh, when I show it to you. In fact, you have to say that, okay? Okay, here we go. Oh. So, I'm a biologist and I study frogs mostly. And this trip has been just so awesome for finding lots of little critters crossing the road and at night when I'm camping, as well as the monarch. And the American toad is also poisonous, just like milkweed. So if you mess with American toad and it gets scared, those warts are not warts, they're poison glands, and so they'll release this white milky sap that looks just like the milkweed latex. And that is poison too, to deter predators. And they have a really awesome sound. I'm going to go ahead and tell you because it's really cool and you can listen for it. It sounds like... Who's heard that around here? Yeah, it's really cool. It's really cool. So, I had to do a little break from monarchs because I'm on this trip not just for the monarch. People are like, wait, what? There's more than just monarchs? But I'm on this trip to see all of the great things about our country or our continent. And by preserving the monarch or helping protect the monarch, we're helping all these other species as well. Now, but let's get back to the monarch, okay? So, they go on this multi-generational migration. They're poisonous. They eat milkweed. They have caterpillars. They have eggs. They can live in our cities. Are you kidding me? Yeah, super awesome. And so, when I heard all this, I didn't know a whole lot about the monarch. I knew just, that they migrate. And so I'm learning a lot as I go. But when I figured all this out, I said, I want to learn more. And for me, the best way to learn is just to go dive into a project and figure it out as you go. And so I took a range map, and I drew a line, and I said, I'm going to bike with the monarchs. And ever since, I've been learning as I've been going and wishing I had drawn a shorter line. And actually, even this map isn't right anymore. I need to update this map even, but this line is more or less about 10,000 miles. And I'm about halfway done, at least with my mileage. I've gone about 5,000 miles. Well, like let's just 5,090 miles. Yeah, thank you. And since I started in March, so I've been on the road about 4 months, a couple days over 4 months, and I expect to be back in November. So I'm not halfway done with my time, so I suspect that 10,000 mile estimate is a little under. But 10,000, 11,000, what's the difference, right? Okay.
500 is a big difference.
Yeah, it is. But I'll just play it by ear, and whatever miles it is. But I do wish I had drawn that shorter line. So let me tell you a little bit of my trip, about how I'm doing this, about what I've seen. And of course, to do that, I'm going to start back at that blue dot in Mexico. And I went there a few months early, and just looking for some volunteer opportunities, some chance to engage with the community. And like I said, when you go, there's lots of rules to see the monarchs, including you have to have a guide. And my guide was this woman named Brianda. How do we say hi to Brianda in Spanish? Hola, very good. Hola. And so Brianda was my guide, and I said, Brianda, is there anything I could help with around here, volunteer? And she said, we get so many English-speaking visitors. Could you help us with our English? And I said, of course. And I ended up living in Brianda's house, in her room. She gave me her room for a couple weeks, a little under a couple weeks, and it was awesome. So every day I would go to work with her, and I do these really informal English classes, and I learned a lot during that few weeks. And then at night we'd go home, and we'd have amazing food, and we'd talk and draw and do all sorts of fun things. And my favorite thing we did was a little farming. So this is a stage photo. The horses aren't moving. But I did help, actually. They were, right before the monarchs leave, they plant their beans and their corn. And so they drive the horses to plow the land, and then they have a row so their mom would put down the corn, and I was in charge of the bean. And I found out that oops is the same in English as it is in Spanish, because I said oops a lot, because I'd accidentally throw down too many or whatnot. And yeah, I just had a lot of fun there, and I'm planning to go back, and I can't wait. It was a blast. And I really honestly didn't want to leave. I didn't want to leave, but guess what? The monarchs, they wanted to leave. So in about mid-March, the monarchs started getting more and more active, and they started to move around the mountain, and then they started to migrate. And so I jumped on my bike, and that's the same bike here, and I have all the stuff on it that I need, and I started biking. And the first, 30 minutes was really, really exciting, because the monarchs, thousands and thousands, were streaming down the same road as me. They were at my feet and above me and below me, all over. We were all biking together, about the same pace even. And that lasted a little bit. Yeah, you can see a few of the monarchs there. And that lasted a while, or 20 minutes or so, and then they just took off into the woods, and the road turned, and I was like, Miss Butters, come back this way. So in Mexico, I actually did not see a whole lot of monarchs once I left the sanctuaries, because scientists believe that they follow the mountain range that goes north-south. But none of the roads follow mountain ranges. They go up and over, which led to me doing a lot of climbing, a lot of climbing. And the biggest climb came maybe a week in, and I woke up that morning and I was like, I could see the I could see the mountains, and I was like, I have to bike up that, I bet. And yeah, I did. So I got pumped. I got on my bike, and I'm like, yeah, you can do this. Woo, woo, woo. And I got all my stuff ready, and I started biking really slow. I go slow. People think I go fast. I don't. I went that day, I was probably going 6 miles an hour all day. But I biked uphill for about 4 hours, and I turned a bend, and I was like, oh, I bet that's the top. Do you guys think it was the top? No. So I kept biking 4 more hours, 6 miles an hour. It was pretty hot, but I'm slowly leaving the valley. It's slowly getting more green. Around the bend, I'm like, oh, do you think that's the top? I had to go uphill for 9 hours. 9 hours. It was about a 7,500-foot climb. And it took me here. Yeah, really beautiful. And I saw my first monarch here. So I did what any person would do, which was slam on my brakes, throw my bike down, take about 100 blurry photos, and then do my monarch happy dance. And of course, people driving by are like, that lady's crazy. But I was really excited because I'd finally seen a monarch, and so it was like, okay, I'm doing this trip. Because when I started, no one has ever biked with a monarch. In fact, I've read of one group that flew a plane from Canada to Mexico with the monarchs, and another group that drove with the monarchs from Canada to Mexico. But I've never met anyone or heard of anyone that's done the whole migration, and no one that's done it on a bike. So there was a little bit of is this possible? And so seeing one was like, okay, well, at least I've seen one. Check. And since then, I see a couple every day, typically, and less than if I'm standing in really pristine habitat, but I've seen over 200 while I've been biking. Now, do you think it took 9 hours to go back down the other side? No, it took 1 hour, going about 45 miles an hour. But of course, it took me out of the monarch habitat and straight to the desert. And actually, one of my favorite things about biking is you can't just select your favorite places to go. You have to select all the places in between. And that kind of leads you to these places you might not ever have considered going, but once you're there, you're like, oh, this is cool. And this is one of those places. I was on this road for probably about 6 hours of this dirt road going really slow, and I saw one car, and that one car was so surprised to see me that they stopped. And we had this 30-minute photo session where they took a lot of photos, and we're all, wah, wah. So I didn't see many people on this road. Now, I did see a bug. And when I see a bug, I don't go, ah! I go, whoa! And I slam on my brakes, throw my bike down, and I take pictures. Now, on this particular occasion, I had just taken a bunch of photos, and I thought, okay, time to get back on my bike. So I bent down to get my bike, and I wasn't paying any attention, and I leaned directly into one of those yucca spines. Now, if you had been on the road at the exact moment that I had stabbed myself with one of those spines, this is what you would have seen. This is just to prove how great an actress I am. I'm really sorry. Mommy! It hurt. It hurt a lot. So milkweed defend themselves by being poisonous. Those yuccas defend themselves by being pointy. And I learned my lesson. And that is 100%. When people ask, oh, it must have been so scary, it must have been so nervous, it must have been so dangerous. I'm like, yeah, because I wasn't paying attention and I stabbed myself with a yucca. So don't do that. Go to Mexico, enjoy the monarchs, don't hug these yuccas. Got it? Now, this road was really slow. I'm going downhill like 5 miles an hour, and I'm just like ready for a paved road to make some miles, because I was starting to think, oh my gosh, Canada is really far away. If I'm going 5 miles an hour, it's going to take a long time to get there. So I was really happy when I got to a paved road. And of course, on paved roads, there's more traffic. And so I'm biking, and I see this motorcycle in distance, and it's getting closer and closer and closer. And as it's getting closer, it's going slower and slower and getting bigger and bigger, and I'm thinking, oh, great, here we go. And then the motorcycle stops right in front of me, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, what does this guy want? You guys want to know what he wanted? To give me free ice cream. So it was like 110 degrees that day, according to my bike computer, and it was hot, and this guy's like, this girl is lost, or crazy, or both, and he wanted to know what I was up to. And the great thing about bike touring is you're a conversation starter, so you get to start all these conversations with people, and that's really my motivation. I see this man, and he stops to figure out what I'm doing, and then I'm like, oh, I'm following the monarchs, and he's like, monarchs? Oh, I see monarchs in the fall. And I can say, oh, well, you know, Mexicans, they have to protect the forest, and I'm going to the U.S. to tell folks to plant milkweed, and blah, 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 and we have this story, and we have this connection, and there's very little doubt in my mind that he didn't go home and, you know, over dinner was like, oh, yeah, and I saw this lady on a bike, and she's biking with butterflies, you know, and it starts these conversations that kind of ripple out, which I find really fun. Now, I know you're thinking, free ice cream in Mexico, why did you leave? Well, because fast forward 4,000 miles, I'm eating free ice cream in Canada. And this woman is named Margaret. She would, Canada, and in Ottawa. But she would be like, wait, why am my picture? Why is it in your presentation? But it's because her ice cream is like the best ice cream I've ever had. She's a dairy farmer, and she made homemade ice cream. And it was so good. And I also have this picture up because in the background, you can see, well, in the foreground, she's feeding me, right? She's like a way station for me. I go there, I get some food, I get some rest, a shower, and then I'm on my way, on my migration. And in the background, it's not a green grass lawn. It is a way station for monarchs and other pollinators. And so I really love this photo because one of the things I think I have most in common with monarchs is being taken in by monarch conservationists and stewards, and you know, being given food and shelter just like the monarchs are given when we plant native gardens. So thank you, Margaret. Now, while I'm on the topic of food, I don't just eat ice cream. That'd be awesome, but I actually have my kitchen here, and this kitchen is made from a kitty litter bucket. I washed it first, just kitty litter, but you can see it's like the tidy cat. So they're recycled, they're reused, they're waterproof. Part of my bike setup, I want it to not look super fancy, because then I don't have to worry about it when I leave it in front of a grocery store unattended. No one wants to steal this bike, right? You can say so, it's okay. So the panniers are also part of that look. And I have to tell people it's a joke, otherwise they don't laugh, which I think is bad, but this is my refrigerator. It only keeps things cold when it's cold out. Thank you. And then this is my kitchen setup. I have a pot that's lightweight, and then I have this stove that I made. And it's actually made from old Coke cans that you put together, and it runs off alcohol, rubbing alcohol. And so I fill it up with alcohol, and then I can light that on fire, and I'll get these blue flames. And then I can boil water for pasta, burritos. Since it's warm out and I'm by myself, I tend to not cook too much, but it's nice to have for like backup. But mostly I've been eating like sandwiches and salad, apples and cheese, bananas and peanut butter, hummus, carrots, you know, lots of snacks. I just kind of snack all day. But that's my refrigerator. Now, the Monarchs have a different food. They don't carry their refrigerators with them. But let's just all imagine how cute that would be for a second. It'd be pretty cute. So the Monarchs rely on flowers for nectar. The adults eat nectar, and then of course the caterpillars eat milkweed. And so you'll find them in these way stations. And one of my favorite things about way stations is that anyone can make one. Anyone that's living on the route of the Monarch can. So these are some kids that I helped, or I didn't really help, I just was there to watch and learn with them. But they were making a Monarch way station in Kansas. And there's so many resources for schools, there's so many resources for folks to get native milkweed plants, get native plants and put them in your yard. And these kids are having this awesome connection, not just to nature, but to conservation, to Mexico, to Canada. They're learning, they're curious, and when they go outside, they're going to discover so much more. And like this is how we develop scientists. So if you have any access to teachers or schools or any sort of after-school programs, think about getting a garden in there for them. Now, this I want to tell you about Vicky. I went to her store to buy food, and one of my favorite things about Mexico is you can literally find a store almost anywhere, which is great. And they're all pretty small. And even if there isn't a store, you can knock on someone's house and be like, "Excuse me, are you cooking anything for dinner?" And they'll be like, "Yes." And I'll be like, "How much for a plate?" And they'll be like, "Oh, how's $1?" And you're like, "Okay." And then you just come and you sit down in their house and have some beans and rice, which is like my favorite meal. So it's really fun. And Vicky was no exception. I bought a few groceries, and then she's like, "Oh, you want to have some tacos with us?" And I was like, "Yeah, see, of course." So her house is just behind her in that black space, the door. And so I went in there, and then of course I'm eating a bunch of food, and I'm getting pretty full, and I'm super tired, and it's getting kind of dark, and she's like, "Just want to stay for the night?" Do you guys think I said C or no? C. C. So that's how I found myself at Vicky's house. Those aren't my trophies. Those are Vicky's sons, but he's off working. He's good at baseball, apparently. But this is something that just wouldn't happen if you had driven through this town. And so one of my favorite things about biking is you get to stay with all these different people and just see all these different ways of living. And I was part of Vicky's family for that day, and it was a blast. And I don't honestly remember the miles so much as I remember the people I meet. And one of my rules is to say yes. So if Vicky had said, "Hey, do you want to stay?" I kind of, as long as it feels safe, I kind of have to say yes, because I know that's what I'm going to remember. Now, Vicky lived in a small town of like 5 houses, and there are chickens in the backyard, and dogs sunning themselves on the road in the front yard, and that's like kind of one extreme. Now, fast forward 4,000 miles, and I found myself in Canada in a different room. I'm a frog biologist. I couldn't believe it. I was like, yeah, of course. But this is in Sault Ste. Marie in Ontario, and Sault Ste. Marie is kind of a medium-sized town. Again, probably another town you would have just zoomed by to get to Montreal or something. And here I am with Val, just having this really cool experience that I won't forget. And then in the middle, between medium town, small town, we also have, of course, in Dallas, big town. And I met a woman or a family that lived in a skyscraper in Dallas. And they invited me to stay at their house. And do you think I said yes or no? I said yes, of course. So those 3 cities I've connected on my bike, and they're very, very different. But same thing has happened in each one. I've met interesting people and gotten to have this cool experience. And today, or last night and tonight, I'm staying with Katie and her family and eating delicious meals. And we went to the beach today, and I took a nap. And yeah, it's been great. So that's probably my favorite part, is the people you meet. Now, this kind of goes along with my shelter where I sleep. Most of the time, not most of the time, but a lot of the time I don't have some amazing person just invite me in, especially when I'm looking pretty rough. They're like, I'm not sure about you. So I spend a lot of my time camping. This is my camping setup, and I usually try and bike about 60-ish miles a day, and when I start to get tired, I just look for a place to pull over. And biking, you can pretty much camp anywhere. I don't cross fences, and I don't cross no trespassing signs, but there's lots and lots of places. We were discussing cemeteries or behind churches in the summer, maybe in like the far, far, far end of a school playground area, far out in the field. You can find lots and lots of places to camp. And so that actually is one of the easiest ways to keep biking really low cost. It doesn't really hardly cost anything because you're not paying to camp. And what I tell kids, the best reason to camp is because this is how you clean your room. Yeah, you just throw your tent in the air and shake it around, and that's how you clean your room. And actually, I put this picture up because it's probably my favorite campsite of the trip. This is at Lake Huron in Ontario. And I was biking, and I saw this little green spot on the map. And green usually means public land, and you kind of want to go to public land because then you're not bothering anyone. And it was like probably a quarter-mile walk with my bike through the forest to get here. And I was kind of regretting it until I got there. And it was really beautiful. And you can see I'm wearing my rain gear, even though it's not raining. And rain gear is awesome for bike touring because it's great for wind and cold and also bugs. So there's lots of black flies that night, and then the rain gear came in handy. Now the monarchs don't need any of that stuff. They're so much better tourists. They don't need any of this stuff. In fact, let me show you what I have. I have a tent, my chair, a tripod. Up front I have a sleeping pad and a sleeping bag. I have a book and a journal, a light. I have a camera up here. This is all of my tools. So I've only had 3 flats on this trip, but I carry my pump with me, and I can fix flat tires. I basically have enough tools to fix anything to like limp to a town. And I can start to kind of think like, oh, my tires are getting low or getting really thin. If I pass this town, there's not another town for 1,000 miles. I better get tires today. So you're kind of thinking ahead all the time. But my bike is really heavy. It weighs probably like 70-ish pounds. It's really heavy. I've got a lot of stuff. I have too much stuff, but gets the job done. So the Monarch doesn't need any of that. The Monarch just needs a tree. And the Monarchs roost in trees or wherever they can find shelter. And I took this picture in Texas, and I saw probably about 12 hovering by this tree. And kind of a theme of this trip has been older folks coming up to me and saying, I remember when I was young, there used to be thousands. And I kind of always just sit there and wait for them to connect the dots. Because there's a reason that there were thousands and now there's one. And that's mostly habitat loss. And it's kind of our responsibility to deal with that. In fact, here is a graph, brace yourself. This is a population graph. So they started counting monarchs about 20 years ago, and they don't count them like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because you would go mad. Especially if you were like almost done and then they started flying. Ugh. So instead they count how much space they take up. So you can imagine 1 acre is the size of a football field, and imagine 1 acre covered in oyamel fir trees, which are covered in monarchs, just as dense as you saw in that picture. So that's how they were counting. And in the highest year was in the winter of '96. They counted 51.8 acres of monarchs. So 51 football fields covered in monarchs. Then fast forward to the winter of 2013, they found 1.6 acres. So this is not a science line, but if you drew a line, a general trend line, you can see where that's going. And it's going to 0. And so this is why we're here, and this is why we're talking about the monarch, and this is why we're planting milkweed, and this is why we're dealing with all these things, is because the populations are going down. Now, the good news is you don't have to bike with butterflies to help them. You can if you want, but you don't have to. I took this picture in Kansas. Thank you. Yeah. You don't have to bike with monarchs. This is just something I wanted to do. This is my way of giving a voice to the monarch. What you really need to do is just get out there and plant a garden. And so I took this picture before my trip. Before my trip, I had never planted milkweed before. It's like kind of hard to remember what I remember or what I knew, but I kind of don't even think I knew what milkweed was. So like, you can learn as you go. And I did a little research. I asked my mom, because I don't have a house, if I could plant a garden at her house. She said, okay. And then I bought some plants. I stuck them in the ground, watered them, told her where they were, and then, walked away. And when I visited the garden on my trip through Kansas, I found out my milkweed was dead. But this is especially for the kids. I always do this at schools. I didn't do this. I don't like gardening. It's so stupid. It's so hard. I didn't do that. I said, okay. I think it might have been too shady. Milkweed likes sun. Think of them as prairie plants. And so I think it might be a little shady, and you really do need to kind of water them that first year to get them established, and I don't think I watered them enough. So, is my garden going to be better the second time? Yeah. So, when you plant your gardens, don't worry if everything dies. You're going to learn as you go. You're going to figure it out. And sometimes you just have to let the plants decide where they want to live. If you plant 5 plants here and 5 plants there, if they like that spot, those will die. They told you their answer. More there. So you just kind of have to experiment and learn as you go. Now, this is a garden I saw in Oklahoma. These gardens do not have to be crazy big things. This was in the middle of suburbia and near Tulsa, and it's a small little plot of land. You can see the chair there. And she had 30 eggs in her garden. Yeah, first of all, the monarchs can navigate through a crazy big city of parking lots and pools and green grass lawns, and they can find this spot and lay their eggs. It's pretty remarkable. So if you grow it, they will come. Now, another thing we can do besides growing gardens is just kind of coordinate efforts. So I was biking in Canada, and I started seeing all these hacked off milkweeds. I had been through probably hours after they had mowed the side of the road. And so you can see the milkweed is still green. And I picked up the milkweed, and you can see here, we've got 1 egg there and 1 egg there. And I probably found about 60 eggs hacked off. And so this is really simple. These monarchs, obviously, they were all eggs. There are a few really tiny caterpillars. They'd all been, a week ago, they wouldn't have been there. So if we had just coordinated those efforts and mowed a week earlier, we wouldn't be having this problem. And so there's so many things we could do to coordinate our efforts with municipalities, with roadsides especially, to make sure that this doesn't happen. And in fact, there's a big push to make sure that there is this roadside corridor, especially around I-35, that they mow at the right times and they keep native to help the monarchs. So watch for that project, vote for it when it happens. It's actually happening as we speak. So plant your gardens, manage your land right, and then share what you know. So I've gone to lots of schools and presented to kids about taking care of the planet, about the monarch, about adventure, about following your dreams, about not giving up. And I'm just going to warn you, I had to throw in a really cute picture from the school. My record is 12 kindergartners in my tent. So, it's just, there's so much to learn outside, and this is the future. These are going to be the folks fighting for the monarch in the future. So if you have a little neighbor kid, or if your kids, take them outside, show them the world. It's awesome. Do you guys think the world is awesome? Yeah, I thought so. All right, so I'm throwing this picture up to prove to you that it's not always easy. All right, I'm gonna tell you that right now. I'm gonna kind of go fast through this, but I'm on this trip. People are always like, "Why are you on this trip?" And I kind of like challenge. I really love challenges. I love pushing myself. I'm not on this trip to win a beauty contest or to make $1 million. I'm on this trip to be a voice for the monarch, and it hasn't always been easy. So that was the last picture. It was in Canada again, and the black flies were horrible, and I hadn't showered in a week, and I was hot and tired and just ready to, not be biking. But I kept going, and 2 days later, I met Margaret and had my free ice cream, my amazing ice cream. Now, this is in Mexico, and I was biking up a hill, and in fact it was so steep I had to push my bike up this gravel road, and then I bombed down the other side, and then the road just fizzled out, just disappeared. And I was like, this doesn't seem right. And so I flagged down this woman and I said, excuse me, is this the road to blah, blah, blah? And she said, oh, no. You gotta go back up that hill, back down the other side and make your first right. And this was my first right, and I was like, you have got to be kidding me. This woman is probably laughing so hard right now. She's just sending me on some crazy mission. But I kept going on this road. And this road, one day later, led to the Pokey plant, which led to the free ice cream. And in fact, from the free ice cream, I traveled all the way across the United States, all the way to Canada, all the way to here today. So if I'd given up at any point, I wouldn't be here today. And for me, the coolest thing is that this road that runs by Town Hall is connected with a lot of turns, albeit, but it is connected to this road. And so the Monarch really connects this whole continent. And I might not have seen a Monarch every day, but every single person that I have biked by, every single road I have traveled on, if you travel on that road yourself, if you live by that road, you can help the Monarchs. So this road connected me to here, and everyone on that route can help me. They can't help me, but they can also help the Monarch. And I think that's so awesome and so special. And so that's why I'm doing this trip, and that is why I'm so happy you're here today. And who's going to go plant milkweed tonight? Tomorrow! Awesome. So I am happy to take some more questions. If you need to get moving, that is the end. And my website is Beyond a Book. I've got lots of videos and photos and stories for kids and adults. And you can track my progress every night to see how slow I'm going. And so I want to thank everyone again for coming. And stick around if you have more questions. Otherwise, enjoy the evening.
Thank you.